Cool. So next is someone from the Delta. It is Alex Matthews. So Alex is the co-founder and chief product and operating officer, but really I think Alex does way more than that. Wears a lot of hats at any given moment. So in case you're new to the Delta in terms of who we are, so we work with founders and large businesses to build their businesses from the ground up. But we can also come in and help scale, and really we have a design, we have an in-house team of kind of 200 plus people that covers a large range of skill sets that service these businesses, from idea validation, product design and development, strategies for launch and scale, and could go on all night. So Alex is going to shift perspective slightly. So Alex is not really speaking today as someone who's launched their own product, although she's launched a lot, but rather from the viewpoint of someone who's launched and worked with a large number of startups and helping them design, launch, and kind of get their MVPs into market. So bringing the experience of doing this time and time again with a lot of different founders, a lot of different situations, products across industries and teams. So over to you.
Thanks, Kaya. Cool, guys. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I'm really looking forward to kind of chatting with a few of you after this. Before I was practicing in my office, very nervous. So hopefully I can share some words of wisdom with you this evening. As Kaya mentioned, I'm going to rather be talking about, I guess, the common failures that we see with founders who come to the Delta. They often come to us when they're experiencing a challenge or need support. And there are so many of the same kind of mistakes that we've witnessed, like over and over again. So I've categorized them into five higher level categories, and hopefully by the end of this you'll be able to walk away and hopefully prevent or not actually have to go through the same kind of pitfalls or struggles that the founders that we've worked with have had to go through before. So as Kaya mentioned, I just thought I would just quickly touch on the Delta and give you a bit of like context about what we do if you don't know who we are. So we have kind of two areas we're a venture builder, but we have the one side, which is a studio model, which is where we invest in ventures and actually start ventures with high potential founders. And then we have a services arm, and through there we can work with any startup that needs support. So at any given time, we're working with about 60 ventures, and out of them, then we maybe have 18 portfolio ventures that we're working with at any given time, and we're supporting across the entire venture life cycle. Like, we're working with some founders who are at very, very early stage, who need kind of support with their value proposition design, their business model design, through to those who've done validation and now need kind of support taking or building their MVP and launching that to market. And then we sometimes have later stage ventures who come to us who are growing quite quickly and need to accelerate or need support kind of understanding how they can unlock future growth. So this has given us kind of, I guess, a lot of experience across the spectrum and kind of the issues and kind of pain points that come up in regards to MVPs. So I'm going to dive straight into it. So the first one is very much at the very beginning. Often we'll have founders who'll come to us and they'll say, I'm ready to build my MVP. And as soon as we start probing them with questions, we start to realize that the idea is actually really still got a lot of assumptions like underpinning it, and there are a lot of like gaps that the founder hasn't really thought about. I kind of say that it's kind of like wanting to start building your house before you have a really clear idea of what the blueprint is. We'll start asking questions like, what are the pain points that you're looking to solve? You have this massive market that you want to enter. Where are you going to start? Which customers are you actually going to start with, at the beginning? There are a lot of competitors that we seem to see here. What makes you different, and how are you going to distinguish yourself? How are you going to take this thing to market? Let's say we build the product. Have you thought about how you're going to commercialize this and make money? And it often is with like newer founders. Obviously, I think that more experienced founders have gone through the pain of learning these things in trickier, and they've failed and then vowed to themselves they'll never make the same mistake again. But we will see this so many times when we work with new founders, that they're not asking these questions. Out of all of kind of like the clients that approach us and need support with building their MVP, we actually redirect around 50% of them to what we call refinement, where our strategists sit with them really to crystallize their idea, their value proposition, their business model, before we even think about building their product. So many of them are so far away from actually starting to build. And we really like work with them to unpack their value prop business model and who they actually are going to be focusing on when they go to market. There are a few tools I've popped here, and we'll share the decks afterwards. Really simple frameworks: value proposition canvas, business model canvas, empathy maps, customer personas. I feel like they're such common tools that everyone has heard about, but I promise you, if you take your idea and force yourself to try and write it down on paper, you'll probably be surprised by how many questions you still have for yourself. So the second stage is someone approaches us and they maybe have a really clear idea around their value proposition and their business model, but they haven't really done any validation. And I was listening to Adam and I was like, there's so many common threads through all of us this evening, because we've obviously all made similar mistakes in our careers, is that going into and rushing into building the product before you do very simple things to help you validate. I mean, this is one of those funny kind of like stories of my friends all told me that my idea is great, so I'm going to build it, which is like the worst, the worst indicator. And there are so many other things you can do to de-risk your idea before you go into building anything. So I typically kind of say is that, you know, the less evidence you have, the less you should actually be spending. So if you haven't got out of the door and spoken to your customers, that's the first kind of step that you can do. You can iterate through different types of experiments, which are a lot cheaper than going and building a big MVP. And we'll essentially typically start on something like customer interviews. Have you done surveys? Let's put together a prototype then and actually go and test this with customers. Why don't we put together a landing page MVP in the case that it's a B2C product? There are so many different types of really like low fidelity ways and cheap ways for you to not only gather evidence that your idea is a good idea, but also to unlock learnings that help to inform what your MVP is going to be. When you start at the beginning, you have an idea of what your product is going to look like. After you've gone through all these like validation steps, I promise you the product you end up building will be completely different to what you would have built at the beginning had you not gone through this process. The last thing I want to say as well was before you move into obviously even doing custom development, one of the later stage experiments that we'll run from a validation perspective is putting together an MVP leveraging low-code platforms. We can really anyone in this room can go online. There's some incredible platforms. I think the one's called MakerPad, which they essentially teach you how to put together really great like MVPs using these low-code platforms that are now like readily available to everyone. And we're starting to leverage this so much more. You can now get an MVP out to market in a quarter of the time, maybe even faster sometimes, at a fraction of the cost, and you'll be able to demonstrate the same level of traction for I think you could, if we, Adam brought up the example of Workweek. You've been running they launched their MVP and it's been going leveraging a low-code platform for I think nearly a year, if not more. I'm not sure what the number is. And only now are they looking to invest in developing a custom application that can scale. Okay, the third common failure is building more than you need to. The same, I'm sorry, from earlier, where I just need to add one more feature and then it will be ready. I am exactly the same as this, and I recently had launched like a pet project from within Delta to the world, and I was kind of chatting to the team, and I was like, no, I just need to add these three more features, and we need to change this button color. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing it. I'm doing exactly what our founders do. It's like, I'm just so afraid that if I launch this thing now, I'm going to be rejected, but I just have to do it because you have to get it into your customers' hands so you can learn. So I know this is difficult to hold yourself back, but you really need to try and isolate, like, what is the minimum amount that you really need to build. We've had some experience with founders who really don't trust us when we say this, and we're like, no, you need to put an MVP together. They're like, we're not building an MVP, we're building a V1. And I'm like, okay. And they're like, I don't want it to be bad. I want it to be like high quality. We're not building an MVP. Stop using that word. This has happened a few times. Those products did not end up going very well. But MVPs doesn't mean that it needs to be bad. You can sometimes have a scrappy MVP, but in certain markets, you may not be able to launch a scrappy MVP. You may need to have a high quality MVP, but this, what is important is how many features you need to include in that first version for you to learn what you should start prioritizing next. This quote, again, that was a reference, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. And I think that, I love this meme, is that you really can end up building for forever and never launching. And then when you do, you'll find out that no one liked your idea in the first place. Hopefully that doesn't happen if you've done some validation first, but really getting your MVP out and into your customers' hands as quickly as possible really is one of the most kind of important things that you'll do. Number 4, and I feel like I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try and get through this quite quickly, is building a custom MVP, but with really poor foundations. We work with a lot of kind of like later stage ventures who come to us and they're like, help me please, this thing is falling over. And some of them have to actually kind of rebuild their entire MVP because they made really poor decisions at the beginning. Typically it is founders who didn't have like a CTO or didn't bring on board a technical kind of advisor early enough, and they used like uncommon tech stacks, maybe tech stacks that were too new, super like really new tech, or they were like keeping their costs low and bringing in like a bunch of juniors to help them to put this thing together. That's fine if you're comfortable with knowing that you may have to rebuild, but I think you can also mitigate it by trying to bring on board like an advisor if you don't have that in-house and you don't have a CTO yet and you want to start making progress. Before you engage freelancers, before you engage someone, find someone who has experience that you can kind of turn to for mentorship support, just to kind of second give you that feedback on any decisions you're making, so that you don't end up having to rebuild everything at a later stage. And the last one that I wanted to mention was about launching your MVP blind. We spoke about like understanding how customers are launching your product, how they're experiencing your product. I've kind of been involved in a few MVPs where we got the product out and then people started using it and I was like, I have no idea what is happening right now. Why is it not working? Because we hadn't baked analytics into the actual product, and then we had to go back and spend like 2 to 3 weeks going and setting that all up so we could actually understand what was happening. I think that the analytics piece of your product is so vital, and it's going to help you understand at what stage of your customer journey they're dropping off, where are the problems occurring. So, you really, like before you end up launching your MVP to market, sit down and understand what are your success criteria? What is your success criteria per feature? What are the journeys that your customers need to go through? What do you want to be able to track when they're going through your application? And these are some of the tools that we use: Mixpanel, Tableau, Matomo, Google Analytics. There's so many out there and available to you, but it's just not something that you should forget, because I feel like it's easily forgotten, and then you launch it and you really don't know what's going on, and it can set you back a few weeks. So that's the last thing I've seen to kind of happen quite commonly in the ventures that we've worked with. So those are the kind of 5 lessons I have for this evening. There are some tools, and we're going to share this afterwards, so you can scan the QR code when you get home later tonight, where we've got like a guide about validation, a business model canvas kind of that we leverage, our value prop canvas, and a few other like tools that if you are at this kind of early stage in your journey, hopefully you can leverage and read alongside this presentation, and it'll be valuable. Okay, that's me.